All right, joining me now to weigh in on all of today's developments, we have defense attorney Jose Baez, former LAPD detective Mark Furman, prosecutor Anna-Sigga Nicolazzi, and Judge Alex. All right, general impressions, Judge Alex, on closing.
It wasn't very powerful. I mean, I know he hit on the points that he wanted to hit on, but you can't really make a case as a prosecutor if what you're doing is raising questions, asking the jury, well, what about this? Couldn't it also be that? Because all you're doing is what the defense usually does, creating reasonable doubt.
Inference, hypotheses. Notice he didn't stick to the evidence. Your thoughts as a prosecutor?
Well, first, I do agree that he shouldn't have been asking. It's not that you shouldn't ask the questions, you should, but you should answer them for the jury. You know, the summation is about giving the answers. You tell them what you're going to prove in the beginning. Hopefully you have proved it, and now you take that evidence and tell your story based on the evidence. While I disagree when you say this is just a summation full of, you know, random profanities, conspiracy theories, I see it very differently. The profanity was there because those are the words of George Zimmerman. They were shown to show his mindset. And this isn't conspiracy theory, but they are painting the picture, or attempting to, of a man who went too far. He had law enforcement aspirations that were quashed. He wanted to finally be the hero. He wanted to liken himself to a police officer. That is why they did that. I think they got a lot of points out they needed to. However, I am concerned that the jury maybe doesn't have it all together as neatly and as powerfully as they need it.
I would bet tomorrow that's all brought together.
They're saving the strength for last. Rebuttal is where the defense does not get to respond. So they're saving their best, their most powerful closing for when the defense doesn't have the opportunity to get up.
Jose Baez, general impressions.
Well, I don't think this was Bernie's best day. He's a much better lawyer than this. I found it to be over the top. I found too much screaming. It was sarcastic at times. And I don't think you persuade that way. The presentation was very off. When giving his inconsistent statements, he didn't have the inconsistent statements one right after the other. He just filled in the blanks for the jury, and I don't think that was persuasive at all.
I didn't think so either. Mark Furman, your thoughts on closing?
I agree with Jose Baez. It was uninspiring. It was false anger. It was bad acting. I just didn't like it. And it's just interesting. The prosecution has still not walked us through the movements of both the victim and the suspect so we can clearly see where they interacted and where they did not.
Yeah. I guess the heart of this, Judge Alex, comes down to, did George Zimmerman reasonably believe that he needed to use force to either prevent imminent death or great bodily harm? That was the burden of the prosecution. Did they get anywhere near that?
They really haven't throughout the case, and for that I can't blame the prosecution, because I think they are starting with a lack of evidence, and they're trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. They're trying to create a case where they don't have the evidence they need, which is why we got all those witnesses that were beneficial to the defense as well as the prosecution, because if they didn't call those witnesses, they had nobody to call. So they had to call what they had and try to make a case out of that.
Anna-Sigga, how did you, as a prosecutor, and you've tried murder cases, and you've never lost one, have you?
I have been fortunate.
All right,
so case for many years.
All right, how do you get beyond the one eyewitness, MMA, ground and pound, fist going down, injuries consistent with that story? How do you get, and then say, get beyond reasonable doubt?
They are beyond reasonable doubt, in my opinion. I hope that the jury sees it, not for murder, but for manslaughter. As you said, this comes down to, did he believe he was going to die? And I say no. A lot of
or great bodily harm.
Or great bodily harm, fine. This is a guy whose first words to the neighbor, Mr. Manalo, said, he was about to kill me. I was being suffocated. No, I was being beaten up. Afterwards, this guy who was very
Wait a second, wait, that's an assumption on your part. That's not backed by the evidence.
That's not an assumption. Those were his words. And again, part of the evidence that you can use, you can make reasonable inferences based on the evidence. And that same witness, Jonathan Good, who was good for the defense in putting Trayvon Martin on top, he's also very good for the prosecution, because he starts to be, you can start to pick apart George Zimmerman's statements. He did not have his head being bashed repeatedly
well, that's not
the
exactly
ground.
true, because he only saw 10 seconds of the fighting. He said he was out there for 2 to 10 seconds. There was a lot more time there where the head could have been bashed. And remember that the doctor also testified that those little cuts on the head, even though they're not serious, are evidence of a serious impact to the skull. They should have gone to the ER.
And a big theme, Jose, is that they try to minimize the injuries and say he's a wannabe cop. Where's the evidence to support these theories?
Well, you know, again, Judge Alex said it correctly, that they just didn't have the evidence to start with. There was a reason he wasn't arrested immediately, and that's because they just couldn't they didn't have the evidence. He didn't have any friends on the force. they had to fire the prosecutor in this case and appoint another one because no one felt that they had the evidence. And now it's a big surprise that, hey, they can't prove their case. I think we saw this coming all along, and this is what you're seeing unfold in the courtroom, the truth.
All right, and Mark Furman, they tried to make a big point in closing by saying Trayvon did nothing criminal. Well, if he assaulted George Zimmerman, and the evidence suggests with a broken nose, lacerations, injuries consistent with the story, then I would say an assault is a crime, is it not?
It is, and it is also the beginning of the confrontation that leads to the shooting. Now, what's interesting, if I was handling this case and I'm walking through the witness statements and the suspect statements and the evidence from the victim, the forensic evidence matches Zimmerman, and then the star witness of the prosecution actually gives me that moment that they're within 36 inches of each other and a blow to the head is possible, and that blow is delivered by Trayvon Martin. So there's conversation, then the blow, then the fight, phone goes dead. So we do know right from the prosecution who threw the first blow and who actually made the first aggressive comment.
All right, we're going to take a break. We'll come back more with our panel after the break. By the way, quick program.